So, we're here today to talk about building a good life, and that's person directed planning. And before we dive in, maybe I'll just tell you just a little bit about myself and about all about inclusion. And then we'll chat a little bit about what our webinar today will look like. Um, so, my name's Kate Owen. I've worked in the disability support sector for over a decade. And I've worked in roles like um, providing direct support, um, recreation coordinator, management of small options, providing respite just for families and individuals. And um, right now, I am the co-creator of All About Inclusion, and we're a small business located in Nova Scotia doing things like training, workshops, consultations, custom support, easy read transcriptions or translations, and a whole bunch of other things. A couple areas of special interest of mine are visual communication, grief tending, and end of life care for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And of course, person directed planning and support. Aside from my work in the world, I'm also a family member, as is the other co creator of All About Inclusion, Paula Hutchinson. And because we understand the challenges and inequity faced by folks with disabilities, we always try and make our work as accessible as possible for the folks that need it. And doing these webinars is one of the ways that we do that. So we do have a series of webinars that are available for free that you can check out and come with lots of resources. And before we dive in, I also just want to say that I'm joining you today from Shpoktuk and Mi'kma'ki, also known as Halifax, Nova Scotia. This is the ancestral and unceded home of the Mi'kmaq, who've been tending this land for longer than many of us can even imagine. I'm a grateful guest on this land. And I'm realizing that this full transparency. Usually I do these as a Zoom meeting, and today is my first day using it as a Zoom webinar. So the chat might not be working. If it is working, I would love for you to share what brings you here today and where you're located. And if it's not working, I'm really sorry about that. And you could also feel free to send it to me as a Q&A, and I will definitely read it. And usually I share this at the end, but I know not everyone can stay typically for the full time. So I also want to say we love to connect with people and we love to collaborate with people. Um, so if you want to get in touch with us because you want to collaborate, you have a question, you want to work with us, just send us an email and we can connect. That's ask us at allaboutinclusion.ca. And you can also check out our website for any of our, we have a bunch of free resources on there and things like that, and to get to know us a little bit better. We have a newsletter that we send out semi-regularly that's you can sign up for on our website. And we do send out free resources on there as well. We also do online or in-person training, and we create a lot of tools and resources for folks. So today we'll be together for an hour and a half-ish. I say ish because I like to leave lots of time at the end for questions. And, we can never really predict how much time we'll need. Like sometimes we could take up 20 minutes or half an hour and still not have enough time for all of them. And other times we might use 5 minutes. But regardless, I'll try and leave about 20 minutes at the end for questions. And you can ask questions. I say ask questions anytime in the chat. Um, if that's not working, for sure, the Q&A function is working. So if you have a question, definitely put it into the Q&A, and I will look at that at the end. So today we're going to talk about the gift of curiosity, laying a foundation to dream. And we do that through person-directed support and supported decision-making. Then we'll look at some practical ways to explore goals, hopes, and dreams. And then we'll talk about actually making the plan. And I do want to mention here that although, we're doing this because um, it's person-directed planning and person-directed support and building a good life are the right thing for the individuals we support or our family members. I also just want to take a moment to acknowledge that it's also good for supporters. Like supporters report, especially support workers, report being so much more fulfilled with their job and having a lot more satisfaction when they are supporting someone in this way to go after their dreams and achieve their goals. And I also want to share a few videos as we go through this. And when we when we do these person-directed planning, building a good life workshops in person, we show a whole bunch of them, and I consider Connor to be a co-facilitator. He was paid to record these videos to help teach support workers. And he's a local self advocate who is a member of People First and My Home, My Rights. And if you don't know anything about those organizations, I'll put a link to them in a follow-up email um, because both of them do and have done really, really amazing work. Connor is an incredible advocate for both himself and his peers. Yeah. And I also want to say this is all Connor's wisdom in these videos. None of this is scripted.
The not to give up, keep trying. Anyone is capable of doing anything. Just keep doing and then do what you love to do. And when it comes down to the day, it's you and it's good being you.
Yeah. So that's Connor, and we'll see a bit more from him as we go through this today. So let's chat a bit about the gift of curiosity. And I can be a little bit of a word nerd. And sometimes I'll look at the etymology of words or like where the words come from, what their roots are. And the root of the word curiosity comes from the word care. So I thought that's really interesting. And being curious, with the people we support and our family members is a way of caring. To be curious means to not know, but to want to learn and explore. And curiosity opens the door to possibility. And I want to share a couple examples of what I mean by this in the context of person-directed planning and building a good life. So I'll share a couple examples. So this one took place about 10 years ago. I was supporting a young man in his early 20s. And he said to me, Kate, I want my license. And in my head, I was thinking, oh no, that's a terrible idea. That I don't think that's going to happen. And to be truthful, I don't think that he would have been able to get his license just based on the testing requirements. But instead of saying that, what I actually said was, "Oh, what would you do if you had your license?" And he said, "I'd get a girlfriend." Right? So it wasn't really about getting his license. It was about a step that he thought he needed to take to get a girlfriend. And when we think about like movies, TVs, being in high school, a lot of times it's the person that has the car, the nice fancy car that gets the girl, right? And another piece of that, I think, was that in his mind, if he had a car, he could drive to meet his girlfriend and wouldn't have to worry about staffing, or if staff had a car, he'd be able to do that himself, because in supported environments, short staffing or, staff not having a car can mean that someone doesn't go out. So by getting curious, we can see what really matters. And sometimes it's not what we originally thought it might be, like in this example. And I'm going to give you another example, and this one happened just the other day. Um, I was out with a friend of mine who has a really significant intellectual developmental disability. And he said, "Kate, I want a baby." And again, in my head, and I think I even started to say, like, I I think having a baby would be really hard, right? But then I stopped myself before I went any further, and I remembered to get curious, and I said, "Well, what do you think you would like about having a baby?" And he said, "I'd get a new house." So again, it wasn't about the baby, it was about wanting somewhere else to live, right? And again, when we go back to like TV and movies and things like that, people often, are having a baby, get a new house to raise the baby in and things like that. So by getting curious, we're showing that we care, and then we're getting closer to the root of what really matters to people. So I just wanted to preface what we're gonna go into with this attitude of curiosity and exploration, and just making sure we shift from judgment into curiosity, even though sometimes it's really hard. So the planning process that we're going to look at today, um, it goes like this. We start with preparation, and what the preparation looks like is getting to know the person, knowing how they communicate and how they want us to communicate with them, getting to know how they make decisions and what helps them to make decisions, knowing who they want to do the planning process with, as well as things like where and when. And then we get into actually doing the dreaming process, and we explore the dreams together using whatever process works best for the person. And a little later on, I'll share some different ways that could look like some different ways of exploring dreams that could work for people with different different communication styles and needs. After that, we take action. Like we break the dreams down into bite-sized chunks that are goals, and we get the resources that we need to do it, or assign resources. The person does. They choose who they want to help them with their goals if they need help, and then actually try doing the things, right? And then after try doing some of the things, come back to it, and we we learn a little bit. We think about two different things. One is about the process that we used, what went well, what didn't go well, and what would we do differently next time. And, you know, check in with the person and be like, hey, how are the goals going? Do you still want to keep that dream? Do you still want to keep that goal? Do you want to change it? And just make sure that, the path, help the person be on the path they want to be on, right? So the first thing, like we just talked about, the first thing we do is we prepare. And to do that effectively, we need to build a foundation. And that foundation is knowing how they prefer to communicate, and how they prefer or need us to communicate with them. We need to have ways for them to drive or lead communication and the process as a whole. And we need to know how they like to make the decisions and what supports they need to do that. And that's called supported decision making. And we will talk a little bit about that. So, might be good to actually talk about what we mean when we say person directed support. And, some of us may have heard person centered support a lot. And maybe we haven't heard that much about person directed support. So I'll just give two different scenarios to help illustrate this point. Person centered support might look like this. So imagine someone named Jack. And Jack lives in a small options home, and he has an amazing support team, and they really just want to do right by Jack. So what they do is they have a staff meeting and they say, we really, really, really want to do fun things for Jack. And Jack loves going to the movies. So why don't we take Jack to the movies every Tuesday? He'll love that, right? And truth be told, Jack probably will love that, right? And they go back to Jack and they're like, Jack, we're going to go to the movies every Tuesday. Isn't that awesome? And maybe Jack's like, yeah, that is awesome. That's what person centered support looks like. It's the people close to Jack centering his preferences, needs, wants, values, and the people surrounding him make decisions based on those, right? Now, person directed support would look like this. Jack has this amazing support team, and they go to Jack and they're like, Jack, would you like to do more things in your week, in your life? Excuse me. And they so they go to Jack. They're like, would you like to be doing more things? And Jack's like, yeah, I really would like to be doing more things. And the staff team's like, hey, would you like us to come up with some ideas that you might like? Jack's like, yeah, I would like that. And so maybe they come back to Jack and they're like, well, Jack, we were thinking, you could go to the movies every week. You could do more swimming. You could plan a vacation. And then Jack gets to make the decision. And maybe he chose the same thing, or maybe he chose all the things. We don't know. But the difference between the two was that in person directed support, Jack got to choose what he wanted to do with his life. And, this can be done not just for people who can say using words. This can be done with visuals. Sometimes people also tell us through their behavior, right? Because all behavior is communication. Maybe they're telling maybe someone might tell us through what they give their attention to or different things like that. So we don't have to rely solely on words to hear a person's preferences. And I'm going to apologize if you can hear sirens. I live not too far from the hospital, so it's a little bit unavoidable sometimes. Yeah. So the other thing that I do want to say just really quickly, on the note of all behavior being communication, if something is a struggle every day, that is a cue to change the approach or the activity. So like that is often a person's way of saying this isn't what I want. And it's our cue to try differently, not harder. Person-directed support and person-directed planning are a key piece of the human rights remedy here in Nova Scotia. And if you're not from Nova Scotia or don't know about it, that's totally okay. Um, it's also like a disability human right for people everywhere to get to direct their own life. Let's hear Connor's take on it.
The right to choose what we want. We have the right for help and support if we need it. We have to live how we want to. Like if we chose to eat junk food and we got sick, that's our right if we're an adult. And then kids have the right to education, to school, and to eat, and we have the right to healthcare, and we have the right to choose, and we also have the right to vote and not to vote. We have the right to disclose who we voted for, and we also have the right to not disclose.
And like usual, Connor hit the nail right on the head there, right? So let's take the person-directed support and apply it to communication, because that's a key part in the planning, right? You know, we need to be able to communicate with our family member or the person we support, and they need to be able to communicate with us in a way that works for them, right? So the first thing we need to look at is how does the person we support or care for, how do they communicate? And that could be words, sounds, tone, volume, cadence. It could be echolalia, which is sometimes called scripting. It could be using visuals or pictures. Everyone communicates through their behavior and actions. Some people through touch, facial expression, body language, what draws a person's attention. So we can see, you know, a lot of times we rely on words, but only one of those that I just listed, and potentially echolalia maybe as well, but that can be sounds too. But really only one or two of those are words, right? So there's a lot of ways that someone can communicate with us even when they don't use words. And if they use words, it's, you know, it might be even easier to get to the root of what matters to them. So we want to make sure that we are receiving communication in whatever way a person communicates with us. So no matter how they're communicating, we want to receive the message. And we also want to make sure that we know the ways of communication that the person prefers. And even people that communicate using words often find visuals really, really helpful. So and we'll talk about this later on, but we do find having visuals available as part of the planning process to be really, really, really helpful. So we want to know what their communication preferences are, and make sure that we're supporting that in their life and in the planning process. And a lot of times, visuals are a part of that if we really gave it a try or asked or checked. Yeah. Then the other pieces, so we just talked about, we want to know how the person we support or a family member prefers and needs us to communicate with them. We also want to know how they want us to communicate with them in person directed communication. So, that's how do they want us to communicate with them? Is that visuals? Is there a certain tone of voice that they prefer? I know some people really struggle with certain tones of voice. We also want to know, like, who do they want to go through the planning process with, right? We want to know what is important to communicate to them. What do they want us to tell them, both in their life and in the planning process? Right? Some people, it really, really matters to them who would support them with something, right? And if they're dreaming, they'd want to know that they could pick the person that they want to support them. They'd want to know that they don't have to do a certain activity that they really want to try on a rainy day or things like that. So it's a really individual thing, but knowing what's important to them can really aid the communication process when we're doing planning. We also want to know where and when, right? So some people, have certain times of the day where they just really want to be left alone, or like don't try and do the planning process before someone's had their coffee, or don't do it right before a meal time when everyone can smell like this amazing meal and is totally distracted. So picking the right time and the right place, typically somewhere um, quiet, calm, and private, even, and just making sure the person has control over when and where it happens, and also noting that you're not going to be able to go through the whole, you know, planning a good life process in one sitting either. Like it may take a month, it may take a year, just at whatever pace the person wants to take it. So we looked at person-directed communication. The next part of building a foundation is supported decision-making. And you're not going to leave here today, um, with a solid understanding probably of supported decision making. We do like whole days on this. We do have a free webinar on it. However, if you want to look a little more into it, um, but this is the framework that we use, and it is based on La Trobe's support for decision making. And we're really grateful to them for doing this work. And what we've done is we've flipped it to be first voice. So from the perspective of the individual. And then we've also converted it into plain language. Yeah. So there's seven steps to supported decision making. And it looks like, the person supporting someone to know who they are and what matters to them, knowing what their options are, knowing what's important to them in those choices and helping them, attach what matters to them to the choices, being able to weigh the choices, knowing how and who to ask for help if they want it, making the choice and then following through. And somebody could need help with all of those steps, or they might just need help with one or two of them. And which part of the decision-making process a person needs help with can change from day to day or decision to decision. So just as part of the preparation process, we want to know what they might need support with in the decision-making process and what that looks like. And for some people, that could look like, using visuals. It could be some people need to try things first to understand and make a decision. Some people, I know some people that the help that they need with the decision is just being prompted that this decision needs to happen. And other people I know need help every step along the way, and both are okay. Yeah. So we just want to make sure that we're applying these principles to the person-directed planning. Making sure that people get to make their own decisions by helping them understand their choices, what they want, and what might happen for any decision. And that is entirely like person-directed support in action, right? Yes. Now, if we bring this all back to rights, people have a right to direct their own lives with the support they need to do so. Here in Nova Scotia, the disability support sector is in the process of changing to align with these rights. And we're all really happy about that, and we hope that it goes well. And if you're not in Nova Scotia, chances are your province went through this at one time or another, or will go through it if it hasn't yet. Let's hear what Connor has to say about rights and how they came to be.
And then learn that our rights come from our heart, not just a piece of paper, and then learn that your rights come from our hearts, and it's in our heart, and new rights come from our heart. Like all the new rights that are happening right now are coming from our hearts because we got hurt, and then we heal, and then we turn it into a right.
Yeah, powerful words, right? You know, and thinking about that, people's rights have, especially people with like disabilities, rights have been kind of trampled on so much over the years. And I really appreciate Connor sharing, like, that happened and new rights happen by recognizing that they happen, finding some level of healing from that, and then turning it into new rights. Yeah. And supported decision making, I think, is one of the ways that this happens, and person directed support, right? Because it puts control, rights, choice, voice, and control into people's hands where it should be. Yeah. And I suspect I'm preaching to the choir here, because if you're here, this is your work too, or you know, this is for your family member too. Yeah. Okay, so we have talked about how to prepare for the dreaming process through person-directed communication and support and supported decision making. Now let's take a look at how we actually dream with people. And before we do that, it might be prudent to talk about some of the things that get in the way, right? So, what are the barriers to exploring hopes and dreams? One of them is survival mode. So, when people are in survival mode, it's very, very, very difficult to get to a place where they can dream about a future. So, especially like for folks with disability, anyone that's living in an institution is probably in survival mode. And it would be very, very hard to truly dream. Um, so that is one consideration. It doesn't mean that we don't try, but the dreaming process might take longer to actually break through into true dreams, right? Another barrier to exploring hopes and dreams is trauma. A really common one is lack of experiences. So if someone hasn't had a chance to experience a lot of things in their life, it might be hard to imagine what new things might look like or even know what to dream about. Self-confidence is another one. So sometimes people lack the confidence or think, why bother? I can't do it. And sometimes previous interactions. So if someone crushed someone's dreams in the past, or told them, you can't do it, etc., that can live on in people and it can make it harder to dream in the future. And sometimes a barriers to hopes and dreams can be us, right? So in those examples I gave earlier about getting curious, if I had stayed down the road of being like, you can't do that, that's not a good idea, we never would have got to the root of what the dream actually is, and the barrier would have been me. Yeah. So those were some of the barriers. What can we do to help? So, for survival mode and trauma, one of the best things we can do is self and co-regulate. So make sure that we are self-regulated when we're with our folks, and then in turn help them to self-regulate through co-regulation. And another thing we can do is support new experiences. So help people try new things to be able to make decisions on if they like it or not. And, to help open doors into new areas of life that weren't considered previously. We can help people build self confidence, and we can help build circles of support, which, helps people have, of course, more support in their life to do the things they want to do. And that can also help build self confidence because a true circle of support lifts each other up, right? Um, And I will say this as well on building a circle of support. If this is something that you want to know more about, we do have a free webinar on this as well called Building Community and Meaningful Relationships. And it just breaks down some practical steps that work on how to do this. And I've yet to meet anybody in my career, and I've worked with some people that experience some pretty significant barriers. I've never met a single person that wasn't able to build community in some way that works for them. So I just want to hope that we can all approach that with the attitude of hope, because it is possible for I'm gonna venture to say, like, pretty much everyone. Yeah. So I can include the link to that in a follow-up email as well in case you're interested. And there's no like sales hook or anything like that. It's just something that we want to share, or wanted to share because it's meaningful to us as first and foremost as family members, and secondary to that as friends and as professionals. Yeah. The next thing that we can do is we can stay curious. And, we've talked about that a bit and what that can look like. And another thing that we can do is we can move things from being abstract to being concrete. And, what I mean by that is like, you know, if we said, hey, do you want to get a job? not everyone can imagine what a job would look like for them. So it might be helpful to be more specific and explore what a job would actually look like. So like, hey, do you think you would like working in a coffee shop and saying hi to people every morning and, helping them get their coffee, um, or whatever a job might look like, right? So taking things from being like this abstract concept and breaking it down into what it would actually look like in the person's life. And one of the ways we can also do this is by using visuals. They can be very helpful. Videos can also be really helpful as well. Now, let's talk about some of the most uh, common hopes, goals, and dreams. So by far the ones that we hear most often are having a home of my own, right? And that's so natural. Like I think most people, disability, no disability, just most people want to have a home of their own. Um, Another one is partner, like a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. Again, so natural. Friends, a job. And another one that we hear frequently is a pet. And unfortunately, folks who live in small options homes, and certainly in institutions, um, may not be allowed to have a pet where they live. So, um, if that's someone's hope or dream, then having a new home might be part of that if it's that important. Another one that we hear quite often is vacation. Yeah. And we'll talk about this just a little bit after, but I also just want to name that, having a boyfriend or girlfriend or a friend or a job can look very different for different people. Like having a partner for one person might mean, living together, going on dates, having sex. And for another person, it might mean mostly talking on the phone or sitting and watching movies together, maybe touching hands, right? So things can look very different for different people. And finding out what they want that to look like is really important and can help us make it more concrete. So, when we're doing whole life dreaming, these are the areas of life that we've identified to look at for whole life dreaming. That's home and living. So that's things like, where do I want to live? Who do I want to live with? Who or what do I want to live close to? What do I want my home life to look like and feel like? And who do I want to support me? Relationships and belonging would look at things like, who are the people that matter to me? Who do I like to spend time with? What kind of relationships do I want to have in my life? So that could be things like romantic, friendships, family. Um, might also look at things like, where and how do I find belonging in my community? And how can my relationships be more reciprocal? So giving and receiving. And I think that's a really important one because a lot of times, folks, especially with intellectual disabilities, can be seen by community as just people who receive. But they have a lot to give to the world and into their relationships. And sometimes community and sometimes ourselves need to kind of get out of the way to let that happen. And um a moment that comes to my mind was when I was managing a small options home, and I stopped in to drop something off, and I was on my way to say goodbye to my Grammy, who was in the hospital at her end of life. And I probably looked a little bit sad, and someone said, "How are you? What are you doing?" And I said what I was going to do, and they gave me a huge hug. And it wasn't one of those like, I'm doing this because I think it's the right thing to do. It was like a bear hug full of like meaning and care, right? And that was such a huge gift that I think about still, right? So that's just a small example, but I think just thinking about how to make relationships reciprocal is something that's really meaningful for a lot of folks. Um, Another example is I years ago I um, provided respite for a young man who lived at home with his family. And he's no longer with us. He passed away a few years ago, but he he was a spastic quadriplegic, so he had very little control or use of his arms and legs. And he really, really wanted to be able to give back to his family who does like everything for him, right? So one of the things that we decided together to do was we would cook supper together, so that when his father got home from work after working all day, he didn't have to cook. And how he would participate in that is he would direct my process. Like, he was in charge of the taste. He would taste every time and tell me if it needed more salt, if it needed more spice, what spice. And he had control over what it was going to taste like, and thankfully he had good taste, right? And he would help stir a little bit too, like anything like that. But um and we would go and we would buy the supplies together, and we would choose out what we were going to cook together. And his family later shared with me that that was like their favorite days of the week, right? When they could come home and not worry about cooking supper. And that was just a really powerful way of him being able to give back and have a reciprocal relationship with his family. And he was very, very proud of that. So, another area of life to look at is work and community contribution. So, do I want to have a job? Do I want to do volunteer work? How do I like to help people? Where do I find fulfillment in my life? And are there any causes that matter to me? Another one is learning and personal growth. So, what do I want to learn or know? What do I find really interesting? What would I like to be better at doing? Are there skills that I would like to learn? Are there ways that I want to be more independent? Um, and I mean, I supported someone for a long time that really, really, really wanted to be able to make their own peanut butter toast. And which doesn't seem like a big dream, but for some folks, it is. And we worked on that together for 6 months, and he was able to make his own peanut butter toast after that and didn't have to ask somebody to do it. And that was that was one of the ways that he wanted to be more independent. And for other folks, I know it's going to school, right? Going to some kind of post-secondary education. So there's a huge kind of spectrum that this can look like, and wherever the person lands is totally okay, right? The next one is well-being, and that's physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. Um, You could also put sexual in here if that's an area of life that they want to explore. That can also be a part of the relationships and belonging. So, well-being might look at things like, how is my health? Do I want to be healthier? What would help me feel self-regulated? Do I want to explore my spirituality? Do I want to feel more fit? How is my mental health? Is that something that I want to work on? And finally, the last one we have is recreation and hobbies. And that looks at things like, how do I want to spend my free time? What brings me joy and happiness? What do I find fun? Is there anywhere I want to go or see? And what interests do I want to explore? And this last one, recreation and hobbies, when we talk about like person-directed planning or like building a good life, or for people living in small options homes or in a supported environment, this one point of recreation and hobbies is what people often look at when they're doing planning. So there's a good chance that this is the one that's most developed, and it's the other ones that need to be expanded. Um, yeah, so taking it from this one part of life of like, going swimming, going to the park, going for a walk, and expanding that out into, intentionally choosing where to live, intentionally working towards the relationships that a person wants to have, being able to be a part of and contribute to their community, learning skills that the person wants in whatever way works for them. Yeah. So um don't be surprised if or I guess it's natural at this point for recreation and hobbies to be most developed, and to then maybe if we're doing person directed planning, to expand that into the other areas of the light. Now, like, we're going to talk about exploring those areas of life. So, like, it's easy to say, like, work and community contribution, for example, but like, how do we do that? Like, how do we actually explore that, right? The first thing that we want to think about is making things concrete. So, if we said something like, do you want to be healthy? What does healthy look like in the person's life? Does it mean being fit enough to go hiking? Does it mean having no stomach pain? Because like GERD and things like that are really common with our folks. Um, does feeling healthy mean feeling less calm, or feeling more calm and less anxiety? Um, I mean, another example might be like a girlfriend. Like, what does having a girlfriend actually look like for this person, or what do they want it to look like? Um, or a friendship. So I have a friend, and we've had to actually like use visuals to explore like and affirm what friendship looks like. So it looks like going for coffee. It looks like listening when the other one talks, and then the other person listening when the friend talks. It looks like, sharing about our days and things like that. So we've had to actually, like, him and I make it really concrete. Like, this is what friendship looks like for us. Yeah. So a lot of dreaming can be really abstract. We want to take it to a concrete place, of what it actually looks like in the day-to-day life. And ideally, this can also, using pictures and videos can really help. Sometimes visual stories, social stories can help. So here's here's one way of exploring for people. Now, this will work for some folks and not work at all for other folks. It can also be a great way for supporters to help come up with ideas. And that's exploring the prompt. What would the best day, like the best day ever look like? And that could look like, what's my best day ever in my current life? What do I do? Who do I see? How do people support me? And then you may be able to move on to what would be the best day ever that I can dream of, right? So it might be a process to dream, slowly dream bigger. But I think that that's a great prompt to start with. Now, some other tools for exploring dreams are talking and sharing. So that could look like just a one-to-one chat, right? So it could look like sitting down, chatting, maybe you're sharing some of your dreams, maybe that helps them think of their dreams. Or it could be like, hey, what's your best day ever look like? And it can also look like if the person wants, it could look like friends and family coming together and and helping with the dreaming process. So it could look like having a dreaming gathering or a dreaming party, and friends and family help brainstorm. And Path is an example that often uses that approach, and for some people that works really well. But the key point is that it's up to the person if they want their friends and family and support people involved in the planning process. Another one can be a vision board, and looking now. I know in the past we would have looked through magazines for things to print out and put on a vision board. Nowadays we can search Google and Pinterest and all sorts of things like that and print them out. So that's a way of making it visual, having a tangible reminder, getting to explore on the internet. Of course, that's not going to work for everybody, but it's an option for some. Yeah. Another thing can be media. So looking at videos like on YouTube, it could be looking at social media. Sometimes it's also like you're watching TV or a movie and just being like, hey, do you think you'd like to try that? Is that something you're interested in? Another way of exploring dreams is using visuals. And I'll share an example of that. In a PDF once we're done this presentation part, and I'll I'll make the example I'm going to share available with the recording in case you want to use it or adapt it in some way. But yeah, the visuals that I'll share are you can cut them out as cards, and someone can be like yes or no or maybe. Yeah, and they came from an advanced care planning. Like the idea came from an advanced care planning card game that we co-developed with folks with intellectual developmental disabilities. So, to help people understand what matters to them and a little bit about advanced care planning. And then we took that same sort of idea and applied it to dreaming. Yeah. And if anyone wants the link to the advanced care planning stuff, you can email us and I'll give you the link on the Advanced Care Planning Canada website. They're free and they're really cool. Another option can be choice boards, right? So having some different options and then someone being able to point at the picture of the option that they'd like to choose. And then finally, some folks really can't make a decision without trying different things. So, sometimes how a person needs to dream is by actually trying different things out and seeing how it fits into their life, if they like it, if they don't like it. And then, if you like something, it can open a doorway into other things. Yeah. And one thing that I want to throw in here, and if I have I'll see if I have a handout for it. I think I do from when we do this as a in-person workshop. So we often will do a whole full day workshop with support workers on building a good life, person directed planning. But anyway, one of the things that can be really helpful. So a lot of times as supporters and family members, we're on high alert for the first signs of like distress or escalation, like that things might possibly go sideways. And that is really, really important. Like as supporters, family members, we want to be able to help the people we care for to avoid that escalation 100%. But one of the exercises that can really help with uh, dreaming and building a good life is looking for the signs of joy. Like, what does joy look like in a person's life? What words do they use? What body language? What sounds? What tone? Do they have, any echolalia or scripting that they express when they're feeling joyful? And the other part about that is a lot of times what we choose to notice, we'll see more of, right? So I'll see if I can find a handout for that. And I'll try and include it with the follow-up email. But that I definitely encourage intentionally noticing what joy looks like for the person you care for, and taking note of it, because what's giving them joy is probably something that they want to grow more of in their life or nurture more of. So those are some of the ways that we can explore dreams. Now let's take a look at following through. So this is the action step. So at this point, we've explored dreams and the person has chosen a few dreams. And now we break down those dreams into goals. So the steps that a person takes to get to the dream. So for example, if someone was like, I want to find a girlfriend, what kind of goals would we need for that? Well, sometimes like a friend of mine who wants a girlfriend, sometimes one of the things is like, good hygiene can really help in finding a girlfriend. Um, Going to places where you might meet someone, learning about consent. So I ask before I touch, what kind of touch is okay. Not only do we ask before we touch, we wait for the answer and we listen to the answer. Yes. And I say that because I have said to folks, you need to ask before you hug someone, and then they would ask and then immediately hug. And then I had to reframe it to, first we ask, then we wait for the answer. And if they say yes, we can hug. If they say no, we don't hug. Um, Another thing might be learning social skills. So the goals might be doing some role play, like how you might ask someone out, doing social scripts, things like that. So those are some examples of goals that might go into the dream of getting a girlfriend. And as part of the action step, the following through, we also need to identify what resources are needed and making a plan to obtain those resources. I mean, money is a big one. So sometimes it might mean Funding proposals to a disability support program. Sometimes it might mean saving up money, like the person saving up some money, different things like that, or it could be staffing. Um, and then person directed accountability. So, it might help if we made like a visual reminder of the goals or like a support of some kind so that the person can see what their goals are and how to work towards them and maybe even check them off. Um, and also sometimes the person will want help achieving their goals in some way. So help from staff or family. And there should potentially be some sort of accountability there, like who they've chosen and that person is accountable to do it in some way. Um, and making sure that someone is like assigned for each step if needed, according to what the person wants. Yeah. So sometimes if we just have this big goal, especially for folks that live in a supported environment, if we have this big goal and these things need to happen, if they're not, if the person doesn't have a set person assigned that is accountable to help them, then it may not happen. Yeah. Now, the last step is learn and adjust. So, this is two faceted, right? So the learning part is, what went well in the planning process, what didn't go well, and what should be done differently next time. And this can be a check-in with the person, right? And it can also be thinking about, things that you would do, say, differently next time, or a different process of exploration that you'd like to try. Um, and then the secondary part of this is checking in, like after the person has tried some of their goal, checking in and seeing like, do I still want to do this goal? Yes, no, maybe. And if no, maybe going back and reevaluating and choosing a different goal or a different dream. Um, and this also is an acknowledgement of like how far a person has come by checking into the goal and seeing how far you've come and and which can help build confidence. And on the note of checking in with goals, do you remember the story from the beginning about the person who wanted to get their license, but really wanted to get a girlfriend? So we started working towards the girlfriend piece, but I also asked, do you want to try go-karting to see if you like driving? And so we went and we tried go-karting. And then I checked in and I was like, you know, what did you think about go-karting? Did you like driving? Is that something that you enjoyed? And he hated it so much that he's like, I don't want to drive. I don't want to get my license. I want to get a girlfriend. Yeah. Um, so that's that. Now, I want to just check and see if there are any questions in the Q&A. And if you do have a question right now, feel free to throw it into the Q&A. I would love to see it. Oh, that's so it's not a question, but we do have a comment here from someone. It says, I just wanted to say I love your comments on curiosity. You perfectly captured my own thoughts and led me to further understand them. Curiosity has been the main driving force in my work and one thing that continually brings me back to my values. I love that so much. Another person says, thank you, you're so welcome. So if you do have a question, feel free to write it in the Q&A. And otherwise, I just want to take a moment and share with you a couple of examples when I talk about visuals. So just bear with me while I change my screen share. Just give me one moment, folks. Okay, so I'm hoping you can all see my change in screen. This is a resource that I will include in a follow-up email. And you can print them out and use them, or just feel free to use it as an example and customize it. Like I highly, highly encourage customization. So I'm using actual photos that are relevant for the person. Yeah. So, you can print this out and someone can put a card in yes, if it's something they want to do. Maybe if they want to think about it, and no if they don't like it or don't want to do it. And here's just some examples. So job, pet, boyfriend, girlfriend, vacation, friends, home. Those are the most common ones. And then here are some other ones that somebody might want. Again, these are just examples. And I will share another example. So, and this is another one that I will share in the follow-up email. And this is an example that works for some folks, but not all folks, right? For helping them think through where they might like to live, right? So we start by what helps me make decisions, the people that they trust to help them make this decision. Thinking about what they like to do, what matters to them about their home. And with all of these, they can either circle one of these, or they can write words in the box. They can glue pictures into the box. They can make art, whatever works for them. And for this one, who they would live with, you would put actual pictures in there. And here are just some example visuals that someone could cut out and glue onto the page. Yeah. And here's an example of how someone might explore. You can use that same process for exploring hopes and dreams. So someone could draw, glue pictures, write words for what their hopes and dreams are. Could then break the goals down, or break the dreams down into goals, and then make an actual plan. So what needs to happen, what resources are needed, and who will help if needed. Yeah. So that's that. Do we have any questions at all? If you do, happy to do my best to answer them. If you think of one later, you are welcome to email. And the email address is askus@allaboutinclusion.ca. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And I'm so happy that you could join me today to talk about this. This is a topic that is so close to my heart. Yeah. Okay, everyone. Take care.